Good afternoon, everyone. It's a lovely day. It's good to be here. Anybody who has ever worked in construction like these kind of days, that means you're productive and you can work well. There's no rain to hold you up. But welcome to the reintroduction of the Building Trades Caucus, the Bipartisan Infrastructure and Building Trades Caucus. So I'd like to start out is we're here in front of the Capitol. There's quite a few members with us today. We have over 212 lawyers in Congress, and yet we only have one electrician, one iron worker, and one painter. The idea of our great democracy should be reflective of who we are, and this is a great example of who we are. We are part of America. We are the Building Trades Caucus. So there have been quite a few bipartisan wins over the last couple of years, particularly of interest in the Building Trades Caucus. $1.2 trillion for infrastructure. Certainly for those who are retired or about to be retired, the pension, multi-employer pension win, called the Butch-Lewis Act, $86 billion to make sure those hard-earned pensions are actually going to see the end of the rainbow to those members. But I mentioned from the beginning, this is a bipartisan. I think it's incredibly important because Brian Fitzpatrick, who is the co-chair, we understand this is about jobs, about the ability to take care of your family in an appropriate way, that makes sure that you have health care, you have pensions, so at the end of a long, very difficult career, that you can enjoy those golden years. And that's incredibly important. We originally started out back in 2016. And the one thing we understood is this cuts across everybody's district and everybody's life. That, as I've said for years, the best social program is a good job. A good job that you can be proud of. But certainly there are a ton of issues that we face here in Congress, and that's why we're here today as Building Trades Caucus. You know, we talked about jobs. Well, jobs and the infrastructure money incredibly important. But if you can't get a permit, you're going to have a tough problem getting to work. And that's one of the things that they're very much focused on. And incredibly, you read almost every day in the papers where jobs are going unfilled, particularly those who work with their hands and their head. The defense industry is incredibly challenged. The idea that doing the job that those who are part of building trades, each of the trades, you can't do on Zoom. You didn't get to take off for the pandemic. We had to keep America working, and that's incredibly proud. And that deserves a round of applause for those standing behind. We have quite a few people here today, but I just wanted to mention you're going to hear from Brian Fitzpatrick in a moment. Who actually is on the other side of the river from my district, but certainly understands from the day I met him what we are facing here in Congress. We have Sean McGarvey, who's president of NABTU, the North American Building Trades Conference, who he and I were business agents together back in Jersey, so it's ironic that here we are almost 40 years later talking about the very same things that mean so much to each of us. And we have a number of members I'm going to mention in just a moment, but we have the men and the women in the back of the hard hats who do this each and every day, and how difficult it is. Because we have one thing in common. You know, I know growing up, I had three brothers who went what was called the traditional route. They graduated high school and went to college. I knew pretty early on that I wasn't that college material. I loved to work with my hands. So I went to the other four-year school called an apprenticeship. And I'm so proud of what I did. But the fact of the matter is trying to get the next generation of employees when so many parents are telling them the only way to make it in America is to go to college. Well, that might be great for some. But you know what? When a hurricane hits, when disaster hits, they're not asking for a PhD in physics. They're asking for a carpenter, an electrician, a plumber, the people that can actually do the work. We need everybody in this economy, and that's why I am so proud to be here with the relaunch of this. And I'm going to start by making an introduction for somebody that time to time we're going to have policy differences. But that's quite frankly what we're supposed to do, have a debate on the issues without being disagreeable. But the one thing we agree on is how important it is to make sure this country continues to work in a productive way. So please, I am pleased to introduce the co-chair of the Bipartisan Building Trades Caucus, Brian Fitzpatrick.
Thank you all for being here, and we're going to be brief because I want to get through everything and answer any questions you may have. We're blessed in this country to have a lot of heroes. We have our veterans, we have our firefighters, we have our police officers, we have our frontline healthcare workers, our first responders, and we also have the men and women standing behind you. These are the nuts and bolts of America. All the things that we take for granted, like the buildings around us, the elevators we use, the light switch that turns on the electricity, you can thank the building trades for that. And their asks are never that much. It's all about fairness. It's about equal opportunity. It's about prevailing wage. It's about Davis-Bacon. It's about the right to organize and assemble, just like every other group has the right to organize and assemble. And they're the nuts and bolts of America. We talk a lot about, when we talk about supporting labor, supporting the building trades, oftentimes it's couched in terms of safety, which is certainly true and important. Oftentimes it's couched around economics and hiring local people that are members of unions that are going to support a local tax base. That is true. But I think we need to start turning the conversation to why the building trades and supporting labor is so important, and that is national security. Because the existential threat that we face as a country is from the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, who are the biggest abusers of labor in the world, the biggest polluters of the environment in the world, the country that's racing ahead of us to so many different metrics and jobs of the future. How do we combat that? The first thing, the genesis, the nuts and bolts, is to invest in America and American jobs and American workers. Because those are the people that build America and allow this country to be the greatest country that God's ever created and survived for the past 247 years, which we have, which is not a long time, but we're the world's oldest democracy still. It's the nuts and bolts of America, and that's why it's such an honor to support them. And their motives are always pure. There are so many causes that we support here. The people of the building trades, I always tell them this is the highest compliment I can pay them. These are the kind of people you want to hang out with after work is done. They are salt of the earth human beings. They're great members of the community. They volunteer in charities. They donate to charities, both in terms of labor and their resources. They have great families. This is Americana in the flesh. And I'm just proud to be able to co-lead this group with Don Norcross to support and work with amazing people like Sean McGarvey. And by the way, this is a perfect day to do it. We just had their, it's still going on, I guess, their convention. And it's unlike any other convention you'll ever go to in this town. It's like going into an MMA fight where they call you in and they're playing some pretty cool music, although they screwed my song up today. But anyway, what we're going to do to reboot this, and this is really important, is we're going to replicate the model that I do with Andy Custer and David Trone on the Bipartisan Addiction and Mental Health Task Force, is we're actually going to put together a professional legislative agenda, and we're going to have the public measure us. What did we get done? What didn't we get done? Because you need to measure in order to really have accomplishments. And I would like to have an entire week on the floor of the House dedicated to the building trades, so we can deal with apprenticeships, deal with building trades. Wouldn't it be nice if we could just make everyone's lives easier, give you 1 week where everybody descends on Washington to focus on one issue? And by the way, it's an issue that is of critical importance to our economy, to our national security, to our environment, all the above. So there is no group that I am prouder to be a part of, no group of human beings that I'm proud to stand behind and stand alongside with than the building trades. So with that, Sean McGarvey, one of my heroes, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Congressman Patrick, Congressman Norcross. The reconfiguration of this caucus is so important, so timely. The work that this Congress and the last Congress and the administration did to focus on much of what Congressman Fitzpatrick was talking about, the competitive nature of our adversaries and keeping our economy the #1 economy in the world, so we can continue to do the work we do on behalf of the whole world. those investments are going to require a tremendous amount of new entrants into our industry. And I'm proud to say, for those of you that don't know, that the building trades spends in excess of $2 billion a year on craft training. It doesn't come from an appropriation in that building over there. Our members make the contribution each and every hour that they work through their paycheck. We operate in excess of 1,600 training centers in the United States. We have, at last count, 282,500 plus people in our training programs in the United States in our registered apprenticeship system. If we were a K through 12 school district, we would be the 5th largest school district in the United States. If we were a state university system, we'd be the 3rd largest state university system in the United States after University of California and SUNY New York. There's only one institution in the world that trains more people in hard skill sets than we do, and that's the United States military. So we have the training infrastructure in place to match the investments that the federal government has made to rebuild our nation's infrastructure, and we're specifically targeting groups that have been historically left behind. For decades, we've been doing this work, targeting women, communities of color, at-risk communities, veterans, formerly incarcerated. They are going to make the bulk of what we're calling the infrastructure generation. It's all going to be coupled together, but there's more work that we need to do, and more work that we need from the leaders of this caucus and the entire delegation of this caucus, and we're so thankful that you all joined. We need some stronger health and safety laws. There's still a lot of danger in the construction industry. Okay? We need the National Apprenticeship Act that's being introduced today, I believe. I want to thank the sponsors for that. Another very, very important thing that we need, quite honestly, is we need permit reform, which again, I know that the Congress and the administration have been working together. It's critical if we're ever going to get real liftoff that our economy needs through these federal tax investments and state infrastructure and county infrastructure investments to match them all across the country to transform our economy. It's very, very difficult to build anything, whether it's a solar park, okay, or it's an office building, or in some cases replacing a bridge, if we don't have the proper permanent reform. You need it. I know you're working on it, and we appreciate it. And there's one other thing, and I know it's close to Congressman Fitzpatrick's heart, it's certainly close to our heart in the building trades that he's been working on. He mentioned it briefly, and that's mental health and opioid addiction. In the construction industry and the building trades, our members are 7 times more likely to become addicted to opioids. And unfortunately, our members are 7 times more likely to take their own lives. This is something that we're focused on. There are no easy answers. We have to change culture. We have to change understanding. We have to come up with good policy. We've got to put money behind that policy, because these are our brothers and sisters. They're not Democrats or Republicans. These are American people who are struggling. And there's somebody in every family in this country that's struggling. So Congressman Fitzpatrick, Congressman Norcross, I know it's not exactly germane, but I charge this caucus to really focus in on that for North America, for America's construction workers. So once again, I have leaders from the iron workers, Eric Dean, the president, Jim Williams from the painters, Jim Hadel from the roofers, and all these other men and women behind us who are here to support and thank these leaders for restarting this caucus. And we look forward to the important policy achievements that we'll work together to achieve on behalf of our country and our nation's construction workers, union and non-union. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Sean. He, like me, we were much more comfortable with steel tips than wing tips. It makes a big difference, because you understand. I just want to announce some of the members of the caucus who are here today. And we have from California, David Valdeo. From New York, Mark Molinaro. Tom Kane from my home state, New Jersey. We also have Nikki Brunitsky, who is speaking at the building trades this morning. And we have Marie Gluskamp Perez from Minnesota, and Angie Craig, who just left. Sean brought up an incredibly important point. You know, when we look at apprenticeship models here in the United States, the building trades literally lead the way. I just got back last week from Codell over to Switzerland, where they've taken the apprenticeship model to new heights. And quite frankly, they've done it for years, well beyond that. So what we are charging with the bill that we're going to introduce today is the Apprenticeship Helps Act. It is charging the Department of Labor to go out and do two primary issues: is create a focus on the most successful training model ever created. It's called the apprenticeship. To market it and to help technically those companies who want to be a part of it. And quite frankly, all they have to do is look at the building trades to see how they do it. And this is something that's going to generate, from the time they're in high school, the idea that there's many ways to make it in America. But what you see behind me are those shiny examples who don't have college debt, they have a job, and they'll have a successful retirement. Second to none. There's many ways to make it in America, and we need all those. So at this time, I'd like to open up if we have any of the members who are here who would like to say anything.
Sure. I'll say something. I'm Lori Chavez Dreamer, representing Oregon, and with all that's been said, I think what's good to remember is how do you grow a bigger bipartisan building trades caucus one at a time. We were elected to change, to represent you all. You're in our communities. I was a former mayor. You live next door. You were my dad. You are all of what we represent, whether we're Republican or Democrat. So one at a time, elect one at a time, and we'll stand behind you. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Marie Glusenkamp-Perez. I represent Washington's 3rd Congressional District. I live in rural America, where we have gravel roads. We get our internet from a radio tower. We need more charging stations. And before coming to Congress, I owned an auto repair and a machine shop. I believe in the nobility of work, not because of what my grandparents did, but because of the path I and my husband take. And it is so encouraging. I feel like the moral quotient goes up 10 notches when we have the building trades visiting us on the Hill. It is so encouraging to have good people standing up for the right things, and it's an honor to stand with you in this caucus. Thank you so much.
All right, we're going to wrap this up. To all the building trades who are represented here today, I know they mentioned a couple of international presidents. I can't tell you, our country would not be able to do what it does after disasters if it wasn't for them. Obviously, you have the first responders during a natural disaster, but then you have the unions who represent the workers who put America back together again after a storm. It is incredible. The largest workforce outside of our military comes together on something they call storm break after those hurricanes hit. And if it wasn't for them, the lights, the roads would not be in order. So they do a great job. With that, if anybody has a quick question.
Hey, Congressman. Jim Sachs from Roll Call. It's a real basic question, and that is, why form a caucus? By which I mean, what formally can you do with the caucus that you wouldn't be able to do, and what formally would you be able to do with this particular caucus that you couldn't do within the existing labor caucus?
Great question. So the building trades in of themselves have the uniqueness of their training system, that they literally build America. The way that system comes together is because of the structure that they have. For instance, not all construction workers work all the time in one spot. The idea of having registered programs that teaches a glazer, a painter, an electrician on the East Coast, when they need work out west, they can go out there. It's transferable, and that's incredibly important. But the most important thing, and I'll invite Brian to speak, is that we get together to talk about the issues of the building trades. And we use that to go forward in a bipartisan way. It's called numbers, incredibly numbers. We all know that's important here in Congress. Brian?
I think you ran away. So are you guys going to have formal weekly meetings, monthly meetings, that sort of thing, or what?
Well, of course. That's the way that we have these. I'm not telling you we're going to do it weekly. It's tough to get everybody's schedule together. But the idea with leadership from the building trades themselves to start to take up many different committees, different ways of addressing it. OSHA, healthcare. Those are the things that we talk about. But the most important thing is to make sure they keep working, and that will always be our focus. Anybody else? If not, thank you.